Thank you so much. I've invited David Fuhrman, who's the Campanile Foundation CFO, to share some information about the endowments and answer some questions that were presented on the listserv.
Thank you, VP Vargas. So I have this presentation to dive into a little bit about philanthropy at San Diego State, talk a little bit about the University Relations and Development as a division, the Campanile Foundation, how it operates, how it manages the endowment. So sometimes when we talk about philanthropy, we talk about, kind of the division of University Relations and Development and the Campanile Foundation as kind of one entity. Adrian Vargas serves as the VP of University Relations and Development, and also the president and CEO of the Campanile Foundation. So there's two separate things. One, as the division of SDSU, it's engaged in fundraising, event and donor relations, alumni, also handles, there's finance and IT for the division. And the Campanile Foundation is a separate 501c3 auxiliary of San Diego State, and it receives and manages the philanthropic assets. And many of you probably have seen and manage C funds and N funds and A funds. So the C funds, which act as like a checking account, N funds that are endowments, and the A funds that award scholarships. There's a board of directors, many alumni, and all dedicated to supporting and sustaining San Diego State. And as well, there's officers. As I said, Adrian's the CEO, I'm the CFO, and Anita is also the secretary. I want to go through a couple of definitions as we get. I have some additional charts coming up, but wanted to make sure we're all talking the same language. An endowment is this gift that has, sometimes we call it the principal or the corpus or historical gift. It has a permanent restriction, which means that we're not going to spend the donor's gift, the donor's money. So if a donor gives us $1 million, that $1 million is held in perpetuity and is not going to be spent. And so if that fund or that money that we've been given goes less than the original gift value or that less than the corpus, then it's what we call it's underwater. And then we won't spend that fund until the balance is above. And so this distributions is like what we're trying to do is earn a financial return on all of these assets, on the endowment assets. So our target is 4% per year, which is 1% per quarter. And of course, these returns are subject to risk, such as we've seen in the past 6 months in the stock market. And any excess returns are retained, and they act as a reserve against future declines, kind of like a rainy day fund that continues to sit in this specific endowment. The management of the investment, there's a committee, there's a Campanile Foundation Finance and Investment Committee that provides oversight and governance over the management of the endowment assets. They're all members of the board, and they create and craft what's called an investment policy statement, and that's available on our website. That really talks about the strategy of the investment decision. So they're not managing the day-to-day purchasing or like selecting managers. They're setting this broad strategy to be able to generate returns sufficient to be able to meet our target distributions. And we've hired and have had for the past about 6 years a firm called Makita. We call them OCIO, or Outsourced Chief Investment Officer. They have about 1.8 trillion total under advisement. They have an office here in San Diego, and they're the ones who are executing investment decisions on a day-to-day basis, and generally overall in accordance with the investment policy. And a little bit about kind of what this investment process looks like. Makita sending us monthly reports. So we manage and look at their investment performance on a monthly basis. But inside MyRF, we work with the Research Foundation. So you can log into MyRF NEPI to see the latest information available. On a quarterly basis, we meet with Makita as a committee in March, June, September, and December. In fact, we're meeting this week with them. And we also record these gains and losses to the funds on a quarterly basis. And after we've recorded those gains and losses, we distribute these reports out to deans, resource manager, fundraisers to be able to be aware of any increases and declines that have occurred during that quarter. And then the distributions are made a quarter after the earnings. So for example, there's a quarter end September 30th, and then the earnings from September 30th are made available 1 quarter later. Want to share a little bit about really what this return summary. So of course, if you're probably mostly aware that there's been some rough macroeconomic conditions in the past few months. So here's our latest quarter report. So you can see in blue is our foundation reports through September, the quarter to date. I want to highlight our year to date and 1-year numbers. So this isn't in kind of absolute terms. This is not good. This is not good for especially new endowments having a 13.2% decline, having a 10.7% decline over the year. What's good and what the committee has really helped focus, since we know that we have a lot of new endowment funds due to our ongoing fundraising efforts, is we want to be really sensitive, and we've specifically worked on this in the investment policy statement and with Makita on any downturn. So you can see this in green is the policy benchmark. And this is how we measure and monitor Makita's performance. So we're outperforming the benchmark, and Makita's doing a good job of helping us retain our assets in this downturn. So had we just really invested kind of a broad investment according to the investment policy, we could have seen the -17%, -14% downturn. And so fortunately, we performed relatively really well relative to that benchmark. I want to share, this is really looking at what the endowment value is over the past 4 quarters. So in the light blue is this historical gift value or the corpus value. So you can see that still continues to increase over the past 4 quarters. That still increased $21 million, but we can see a $44 million decline in the overall balance. So even though we're continuing to add to the endowment, the overall balance is continuing to decline due to that downturn that you saw on the previous slide. I want to show something here which gives some context of really the newness of these funds. So and they haven't had, and I'll show you in the next slide a little bit more, but this provides some context. So when we look over the past 3 years, we've added $86 million to the endowment from donor contributions to San Diego State University. So that's cash that we've received and made investments over the past 3 years. So some of these haven't had a lot of opportunity to be able to generate returns and provide a buffer for this economic downturn. But really, it's a really incredible performance to be able to see our donors coming to San Diego State and engaging in this sort of scale. But what that means is a lot of them are new, and they can hit right at in some ways, a bad time in terms of the macroeconomic conditions. This chart will show you the percentage of really a surplus. So in the green, you can see these funds, 114 funds have 0 to 4% surplus, all the way up to 157 funds on the far right that have over 50% surplus, meaning we've generated investment returns and had retained earnings on those investment returns of over 50%. And those are generally funds that have been around for a while. They've been through a couple of market cycles. And then on the left are the funds that are underwater, or the funds that aren't going to be making distributions because the current value is less than the original gift value. So you can see 0 to 4%, 10 to 4%. And then that 10 to 20, really, as we look back at that other slide, it's about 13% is the most significant underwater. And so these funds won't begin to make distributions until they can get back into the green, until we can see some turnaround in some quarters to be able to generate returns in the market. And I also wanted to make a note here regarding scholarships and program funds, and really like this engagement and interaction with donors, that when donors are contributing to San Diego State, they want to see impact. So they're buying impact. And so unspent donor funds just don't achieve that. So there's been an emphasis on awarding scholarships and in spending program funds so that we can really achieve the impact that the donors have wanted to contribute to. And they consistently tell us that they'll give more when we're able to deliver on that impact. And really, the donors can have and will repurpose unspent funds. So a program that may have received some funds, a donor may come to us and say, well, it's hasn't been spent for the past 3 years, and they choose to repurpose that to another area. And I'll go ahead and stop the screen share and
Yeah, there's at least one question, CFO Furman. And one question I had was about Senator Aros. He posted several questions on our Senate listserv. So, oh, good, he's raised his hand. So I'll let him ask them for himself. Okay, Senator Rafis, you can go first, please.
sorry,
You can't hear
muted.
you. You're
Yeah.
muted. You're still muted.
Is that it? Okay.
Now
David,
we can.
we appreciate what the foundation does, and I think many of us are aware of the process, and it's important that you look out for the wishes of donors and so on. I think though, from reading it, is instead of the quarter ends September 30th, and we're expecting, or a department is expecting a 1% return of 10 to 20,000, for them to get notice that day or maybe the day before that, oh, that money is not coming. What, knowing that the downturn happened a month ago or 2 months ago or even 3 months ago, maybe giving a warning ahead of time saying, hey, it looks as though that quarterly payment you're expecting in 2 months or 2 days is going to be less than you desire. And so therefore the departments and the schools can better plan for the significant and vital money source that they use to help their students out on a regular basis. And they've already committed in some cases to many of these students. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And we hear that. And part of our response, and when we look at like our performance through June 30, which saw some funds go underwater, and we reacted thinking, well, let's see through another quarter and see how we perform. And then when we closed and saw what the performance was like through September 30th, the timing of this is like it will still take us a quarter, not a quarter, a month to close our financial statements and get the reporting done and to be able to book these changes. So that put us for the September 30th to about the end of October. And immediately after that, we began distributing reports and letters to donors to be able to help support some underwater funds if they want to be able to contribute to a scholarship or be able to contribute when they are underwater. We started that process and communicating with deans and distributing updated endowment reports, gave them a list of all the underwater funds, the distributions that they wouldn't be receiving. So we distributed those November 2nd. So maybe Jerome, or I don't know. I don't want to.
Yes, Senator.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, please go ahead and
Sure.
ask your questions.
So I would like to yield my time to two speakers. First is the astronomy chair, Eric Sandquist, and the second will be an astronomy graduate student named Josh Bardwell.
Please go ahead, Chair Sandquist.
Thank you for your time. And thank you for the presentation. It did answer some of our questions. I'll try and add a few things briefly and clearly, hopefully. We, in the astronomy department, have one of these underwater funds. It's a rather large one, and it is, with donor intent, entirely for student support. And all of the grad students in our department get support from this fund. We had to discover, and I emphasize the we part, our department had to discover in September that there was not going to be any distribution in this quarter. And it took more than a month after that to get any information that the fund was underwater. So at the very least, there was a breakdown of communication. And I feel like, at least in this particular case, we should get direct information about the fund being underwater, because we have to plan to fund our students, and we need that information in a timely form. And when it's not there, we can't do right by the promises to our students, and the students can't plan their futures properly. So that's number one, that we need the direct, timely information about the funds. But number two, sort of going back to what Senator Reyfus was saying, we need some kind of financial advice. We do not get any financial advice as part of being the custodians of this fund. We don't see the financial information and the trends, and there are people in the university whose job it is to follow these. We are not the experts. We need to have that communication given to us if we are going to be able to plan properly for our own students. So those are my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Sandquist. I'd like to go ahead and ask, I think it's your name, the student, Josh Barnwell.
Josh Bardwell, yes, thank you.
Please go ahead and speak.
Hi, I'm Josh Bardwell. I'm a first-year astronomy master's student. I speak on behalf of all my classmates when saying the discontinuation of funding from the Booth Foundation has created a very difficult situation for us all. Many factors get taken into account when deciding which graduate school to attend, but for many of us, the promise that tuition will be covered was largely at play. Although being a graduate student comes with sacrifices such as application fees, working jobs to make ends meet, studying for classes, and developing a research thesis, we all know there's no place we'd rather be. Although I don't know the full complexities of what was fully considered when making this financial decision, I do ask that they fully consider the very real impacts of their actions on us graduate students. Had we known that this tuition promise was circumstantial, many of us could have chosen other universities or job offers while they were still available. And now, even if we wanted to transfer, most application deadlines are due in 9 days, not allotting enough feasible time to apply and obtain letters of recommendation, assuming we had the necessary funds to reapply. Many of us do not know where to go next amidst all this uncertainty. We've made the commitment to be here, and up until now, we were very pleased with our decision. All we ask is that this sacrifice is honored and kept with the financial commitment made to both the first and second year grad students. Thanks.
Thank you so much, graduate student Barnwell. We appreciate your comments and the time you took to come and speak with us today. I don't know if
Excuse me, Chair Bird, I just have one final comment. I haven't heard what we're supposed to do. I haven't heard a plan.
hold on just
No,
a
may
second.
I just add that when the university makes a multi-year commitment to students or to a program, we put the dollars aside so that we can honor that multi-year commitment. And my understanding from this scholarship is that it was a one-year commitment, not a multi-year commitment. When we do a multi-year commitment, the dollars are set aside.
Okay, thank you, VP Vargas. I think that's still a problem, but thank you. Okay, so there are two more hands up. Senator Adams.
Yes, thank you for the very clear presentation. I just wanted to emphasize some of the previous speakers who mentioned that it'd be really useful if the relevant faculty and staff could have access to the surplus amounts in these accounts. So like I advise a major that has a scholarship fund. It's relatively new, just a few years old. I have no idea if we have a surplus in there or not. And if I did, it would help me at least give an estimate of whether I can expect that we're going to have funding for that next year. So I know you mentioned that you gave some information to dean's offices. Deans frequently don't share information with departments. So it may be useful to share that information directly with the people who are administering the funding and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator
May I just address that? In years where the fund will earn, let's say it earns 7% in 1 year, 4% gets distributed and 3% goes back into the fund so that the following year, the distribution is made on a higher principal amount. That ensures that over the long term, the fund keeps up with the pace of inflation and it maintains its spending power. So the rainy day aspect of it is that over time, this fund will be as meaningful to the beneficiaries, in 100 years as it is right now.
Okay, thank you, VP Vargas. Senator Bajan?
Yes, I've been hearing from this for a couple of days now, and thanks for all the explanation. From my understanding, the astronomy department received 75K every 3 months, and then suddenly 0K right now. And I'm also looking at all these other things that are happening on campus. Where there are, loans made to Mission Valley, loans made to all kind of endeavors. You mentioned that the deans and the provost were asked to chip in. I'm just with there being still a fair amount of one-time funding available in campus. I'm not sure why in these kind of instances we just have to have such a huge fluctuation from like 75 to 0. Why it cannot be said, okay, you get 30 or 40 this quarter, but then the other 2 quarters you also get less, so that we kind of can keep most of our commitments. Why can it be there alone to the astronomy fund, for a short time? That for sure has to be made up by the fund.
Okay, thank you.
David, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I can answer that. So the distribution from the endowment set by policy by the board. So that 1% distribution, which is based on a 3-year rolling average. So that distribution is going into a C fund, which then has discretion for the PI in this case to be able to spend or not to spend. So they're not mandated to then spend that 75K. I think one of the comments about, maybe some financial advice, right? So like planning some of this financial advice and how to structure these multi-year commitments is something that, I'm happy and my staff are happy to sit down on a one-on-one basis with astronomy, with any other area that certainly would like it to sit down and to discuss and strategize.
Okay, thank you. And the final question, because we do have a packed agenda and we're running short on time. Senator Arroz? You're muted.
Just to follow up on a few things, as Arlette noted, it was a very sudden drop, and it would have been better if it was a ramp. Number 2, we do have different accounts for the booth funds, and the money that goes into the scholarship fund is particularly opaque to us. We don't know how much is there, and we're not getting the information, and so. I realize, we're over time, but we just need to have more information about this, both funds, and how to plan.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for speaking to this. I know that the Senate Executive Committee is going to be following up on these issues in a meeting with URAD, probably in January or February. So please keep sending us any of your questions or concerns so that we can continue to follow up. Thank you both, CFO Furman and VP Vargas for being with us today.
Thank you very much.